The drywall compound felt cold between my fingers as I smoothed another patch at 2 in the morning. Sleep had become a stranger to me over the past few months, so I'd taken to working on the house repairs that Cleo kept nagging me about. The irony wasn't lost on me, fixing walls while my marriage crumbled around them. Mason Reddan, contractor by trade, sleepless by circumstance. That's what I'd turned into in this Rust Belt Ohio city that time seemed to overlook. Our neighborhood hovered on the edge of decline, porch lights flickering like fading stars while sirens provided their nightly soundtrack. The house groaned with unspoken truths, and it turned out my wife did too. Through the heating vent, I heard her voice drift down from our bedroom. Soft, intimate whispers that she hadn't used with me in months. The name Eli floated through the metal ducts like poison gas. I set down my putty knife and listened harder. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," she whispered into what I assumed was her phone. The giggle that followed made my stomach twist. It was the same laugh she'd used when we first met 15 years ago, back when I thought I'd won the lottery by landing a woman like Cleo. Cleo Reddan, corporate lawyer, ice queen in Armani suits, and apparently, my soon-to-be ex-wife. I finished the patchwork in silence, my mind racing. The smart play would be to confront her directly, but 17 years of marriage had taught me that Cleo was a professional liar. She'd have an explanation ready, probably something about a client named Eli or a new paralegal at the firm. No, I needed proof. The next morning I made coffee and watched Cleo prepare for another day at Henderson, Mills and Associates. She moved through our kitchen like a dancer, every gesture calculated and precise. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she favored for court appearances, and her makeup was flawless despite the early hour. "You're up early," she said, without looking at me, her attention focused on her phone screen. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get an early start on the Morrison renovation." She nodded absently, typing something with her perfectly manicured nails. The same nails that used to trace patterns on my chest when we were young and foolish enough to believe in forever. "I'll be late tonight," she said, finally glancing up. "Big case prep." "Which case?" For just a moment, her composure cracked. "The Henderson merger. Very complicated." I nodded and sipped my coffee. Cleo had been working at the firm for 8 years, and I'd learned to speak her language. There was no Henderson merger. The firm's name was Henderson, Mills and Associates, because old man Henderson had founded it 30 years ago. He wasn't merging with anyone. After she left, I stood in our empty kitchen and made a decision that would change everything. I drove to Murphy's Electronics on the east side of town. Danny Murphy had been installing security systems since before the internet existed, and he owed me a favor from when I'd renovated his mother's bathroom for cost. "Mason, you old dog," Danny said when I walked into his cluttered shop. "What brings you to my palace of wires and widgets?" "I need a couple of micro cameras. Something small, wireless, good resolution." Danny's expression shifted. "Everything okay at home?" "Just want to keep an eye on things while I'm working jobs. You know how it is in this neighborhood." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I've got some units that'll work with existing smoke detectors, completely invisible unless you know what to look for." 20 minutes later, I walked out with 2 cameras and a wireless receiver that would record everything to an encrypted drive. The whole setup cost me $400, money well spent for peace of mind. Installing them took less than an hour. I'd wired enough houses to know my way around electrical systems, and the cameras slipped into our existing smoke detectors like they'd been designed for it. One covered the living room and front door, the other had a clear view of our bedroom. I felt like a criminal in my own home, but the alternative was living with uncertainty. And uncertainty, I'd learned, was just another word for slow torture. That afternoon, while reviewing blueprints for the Morrison job, my phone buzzed with a text from Cleo. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. "Okay. Love you." She didn't respond. 2 days passed like a fever dream. I went through the motions of normal life, working on the Morrison renovation, grabbing beers with my old friend Mick at his auto shop, even having dinner with Cleo's parents on Sunday like we'd done every month for the past 5 years. But underneath the routine, I was drowning in anticipation. Every time my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the cameras, my heart hammered against my ribs. Monday evening, everything changed. I was installing new cabinet hardware in the Morrison kitchen when my phone lit up with alerts. Motion in the living room, then the bedroom. I glanced at my watch, 6:30 p.m. Cleo wasn't supposed to be home until after 9. My hands shook as I opened the camera app and switched to live view. Cleo stood in our living room, but she wasn't alone. A man I'd never seen before stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture so intimate it made me nauseous. He was younger than me, maybe 35, with the kind of carefully styled hair that cost more than I made in a week. His clothes screamed money, designer jeans, expensive sneakers, a watch that probably cost more than my truck. I watched my wife of 17 years lead this stranger through our home like she owned it. Which, technically, she did. We'd bought the house in her name because her credit was better, another decision that seemed foolish now. They moved to the bedroom, and I had to force myself to keep watching. Not because I wanted to see what happened next, but because I needed evidence, proof that would hold up in divorce court. What I saw was worse than I'd imagined. Cleo wasn't just having an affair, she was flaunting it. She gave him a tour of our bedroom, pointing out features like a real estate agent showing a property. She opened my dresser drawers, my closet, even showed him the bathroom I'd renovated with my own hands last summer. The stranger, Eli, I assumed, examined everything with the casual interest of someone shopping for a new home. When he picked up the framed photo of Cleo and me from our honeymoon, she laughed and tossed it face down on the nightstand. That's when I stopped the feed and closed my phone. I sat in the Morrisons' half-finished kitchen, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and fresh paint, and felt something inside me break. Not my heart. That had been cracking for months. Something deeper. Something that couldn't be repaired with compound and a steady hand. The drive home took forever, and no time at all. I parked 3 blocks away and walked through the alley behind our house, moving like a ghost through my own neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson's dog barked once from behind her fence, then fell silent. The lights were off in our bedroom, but I could see the glow of a phone screen through the curtains. They were still there, probably planning their next move while I worked late to pay for the roof over their heads. I let myself into the garage through the side door and gathered what I needed. 2 large duffel bags, a box of garbage bags, and the portable hard drive where I kept backups of all my important files. Then I went to work. 17 years of marriage leaves a mark on a house. My tools in the garage, my clothes in the bedroom, my books on the shelves, my coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet. Photos of us at Christmas, on vacation, at Cleo's law school graduation. Evidence of a life I'd thought was real. I packed systematically, like I was clearing out a job site. Clothes, personal documents, the watch my father had given me when I graduated high school. I left the furniture. Most of it had been Cleo's choice anyway. But I took everything that mattered. The hardest part was the photos. 17 years of memories reduced to a shoebox that fit in the bottom of a duffel bag. I almost left them behind, but something stopped me. Maybe someday I'd want to remember when we were happy, before ambition and money and whatever else had poisoned us. By 3 a.m., I'd erased myself from the house as thoroughly as possible. I'd even updated my emergency contacts at work, changed my direct deposit to a new account I'd opened that afternoon, and forwarded my mail to a P.O. box across town. The last thing I did was download the camera footage to an encrypted drive and select the clearest image. Cleo and her boyfriend standing in our bedroom, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling like they'd just won the lottery. I printed the image on our home printer, noting the timestamp and camera ID in the corner. Then I sat at our kitchen table and wrote a single sentence on the back. Notice of separation. Forward all legal correspondence to P.O. Box 247, Millfield, 044654. I left the photo on the kitchen counter next to my house keys and wedding ring. Then I walked out of my marriage and into the cold Ohio night, carrying everything I owned in 2 duffel bags and a box of memories. My phone buzzed as I loaded my truck. A text from Cleo. Working late again. Big breakthrough in the case. I typed back. Good luck with that. Then I attached the photo and hit send. I didn't block her number. I didn't need to. I was already gone. The Millfield Motor Inn wasn't much to look at, but it was clean and cheap and asked no questions when I paid cash for a week in advance. Room 237 became my new address, a 12 by 15 box with wood paneling that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration and a view of the interstate that never slept. I'd been there 3 days when my phone started ringing. The first call came at 6 a.m. on Thursday. Cleo's name lit up my screen, but I let it go to voicemail. She called 17 more times that day. I counted. The voicemails started apologetic. Mason, please call me back. We need to talk about this like adults. By evening, they'd turned desperate. This is insane, Mason. You can't just disappear because of a misunderstanding. By Friday morning, they were angry. Fine, ignore me, but you can't run forever. We have 17 years together. That has to count for something. I deleted them all without listening to the end. Mick Daly found me at the diner on Route 9 Friday night, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee and pretending to read a week-old newspaper. He slid into the booth across from me like he owned the place, which he practically did. Mick had been buying coffee and pie at Rosie's Diner since we were teenagers, back when we thought we'd conquer the world with our bare hands and bad attitudes. You look terrible, he said by way of greeting. Thanks. You're a real charmer. Mick had aged better than me. His hair was still thick and dark, though gray had started creeping in at the temples. He owned Daly's Auto Repair and the boxing gym above it, 2 businesses that somehow managed to turn a profit in a town where everything else was slowly fading. Cleo came by the shop today, he said. I looked up from my newspaper. And? She's looking for you. Says you had some kind of breakdown and disappeared. What did you tell her? That I hadn't seen you. Mick flagged down the waitress and ordered coffee, which was true at the time. But now I'm seeing you, and you look like a man who needs to talk. I folded the newspaper and set it aside. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with why you're living at the Motor Inn instead of the house you've been fixing up for the past 5 years. So I told him, not everything. Some humiliations are too private to share, even with your oldest friend. But enough. I told him about the birth control pills, the cameras, the footage of Cleo giving her boyfriend a tour of our bedroom. Mick listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he sat back in the booth and shook his head. That's cold, even for Cleo. You never liked her. I liked her fine when she made you happy, but that was a long time ago. He stirred sugar into his coffee with more force than necessary. What's your plan? Don't have one yet. Right now I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. Well, whatever you decide, you can't stay at that motel forever. Place is a health hazard. He wasn't wrong. The Motor Inn attracted a steady stream of truckers, traveling salesmen, and people like me who'd run out of better options. My neighbors included a woman who sold something illegal out of room 231 and a man who practiced guitar at all hours of the night. I've got a place, Mick said. Above the gym. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and quiet. You can stay there while you figure things out. I can't. You can, and you will. What are friends for? That's how I ended up living in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like leather and sweat, with a view of the boxing ring where Mick trained local kids who had nowhere else to go. It wasn't much, but it was better than the Motor Inn. The apartment came furnished with the basics: a bed, a small kitchen table, a couch that had seen better decades. I unpacked my duffel bags and tried to make it feel like home, but everything reminded me of what I'd lost. Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee and watching two teenagers spar in the ring below when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Eli. We should talk." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. About what? About Cleo. About this situation. About how we can all move forward like civilized people. The audacity was breathtaking. This stranger wanted to have a civilized conversation about the situation he'd created by sleeping with my wife in my bed. I typed back, "There's nothing to discuss." "I think there is. Meet me at Brennan's bar tonight at 8. Just two guys having a conversation." Brennan's was a dive bar on the south side of town, the kind of place where conversations were settled with words or fists, depending on how much alcohol was involved. It was also neutral territory, neither Cleo's world nor mine. Why would I want to talk to you? Because Cleo's a mess, and this situation isn't good for anyone. Maybe we can work something out. Work something out. Like my marriage was a business deal gone wrong. I showed the messages to Mick when he came upstairs for lunch. "Don't go," he said immediately. "Nothing good can come from that conversation." Maybe he's right. Maybe we can work something out. "Mason, listen to me. This guy isn't trying to help you. He's trying to manage you. There's a difference." But curiosity won out over common sense. I wanted to see the man who'd blown up my life, to understand what Cleo saw in him that she couldn't find in me. Brennan's bar looked exactly like it had 20 years ago. Dim lighting, scarred wooden tables, and the persistent smell of stale beer and broken dreams. I arrived early and chose a table in the back corner where I could see the door. Eli walked in at 8:05, scanning the room like he was looking for threats. He was smaller than he'd appeared on camera, maybe 5'9" in expensive shoes that added an inch. His clothes were casual, but carefully chosen. Dark jeans, button-down shirt, leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He spotted me and approached with the confident stride of a man who'd never been punched in the face. "Mason?" He extended his hand. "Eli Pruitt." I didn't shake it. "Sit down." He slid into the booth across from me, his smile faltering slightly. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "What do you want, Eli?" "I want to clear the air. This whole situation has gotten out of hand." "Which situation is that?" "Come on, man. We're both adults here. Cleo told me about your marriage, about how things have been difficult between you two." "Did she?" "Look, I'm not proud of how this started, but Cleo and we have something real, something she hasn't had in a long time." The bartender, a woman with tired eyes and faded tattoos, approached our table. "What can I get you?" "Whiskey," I said. "Make it a double." "Same," Eli said, though he looked like more of a wine cooler type. When she left, Eli leaned forward. "The point is, Cleo's ready to move on. She wants a divorce, but she wants to keep things amicable, for everyone's sake. Amicable. Clean break. No lawyers, no fighting over assets. You go your way, she goes hers." The bartender returned with our drinks. I took a sip and felt the whiskey burn its way down my throat. And what do you get out of this arrangement? I get to be with the woman I love without all the drama. "The woman you love?" I set down my glass. "How long have you known her, Eli?" 3 months. 3 months. And you love her. Sometimes you just know. I almost laughed. You know what I knew 3 months into my relationship with Cleo? That she was ambitious, that she was smart, that she could be cruel when she didn't get her way. But love? Love takes time. Love takes seeing someone at their worst and choosing to stay anyway. Eli's jaw tightened. Maybe that's the difference between us. Maybe I see her potential instead of dwelling on her flaws. Her potential. I finished my whiskey. "Tell me something, Eli. What do you do for a living?" I'm in tech, software development. Your own company? I'm between projects right now. Between projects. So you're unemployed. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're an unemployed tech bro who thinks he's found a sugar mama in my wife. Eli's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Let me guess. You met Cleo at some upscale bar downtown. Probably impressed her with talk about your startup ideas and your vision for the future. She bought you drinks, maybe dinner, made you feel important. His silence was answer enough. Here's what you don't understand about Cleo, I continued. She doesn't love you. She loves the idea of you, the excitement of something new and forbidden, but that wears off, usually around the time the credit card bills start arriving. You're wrong. Am I? How much money has she spent on you in 3 months? New clothes, nice dinners, maybe helped with your rent? Eli stood up abruptly. This was a mistake. I thought we could have a reasonable conversation. We are having a reasonable conversation. I'm just not telling you what you want to hear. He threw a 20 on the table and headed for the door. I called after him. Eli. He turned back. Stay away from my house. Whatever arrangement you have with Cleo, it doesn't include disrespecting the home I built. He left without responding, and I ordered another whiskey. Sunday morning brought rain and regret in equal measure. I woke up in Mick's apartment with a headache that felt like someone had used my skull for batting practice. The confrontation with Eli had solved nothing and probably made everything worse. My phone showed 6 missed calls from Cleo and 3 text messages I didn't want to read. Mick found me in the kitchen, nursing black coffee and staring out the window at the empty boxing ring. How'd it go last night? He asked. About like you'd expect. He poured himself coffee and joined me at the small table. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. Good, because I've got something else on my mind. Mick's expression was serious. I did some asking around about your friend Eli. He's not my friend. Figure of speech. Anyway, turns out Eli Pruitt isn't exactly who he claims to be. That got my attention. What do you mean? Remember Tommy Chen? Used to work at the bank before they automated everything? I nodded. Tommy had been a loan officer at First National until computers made his job obsolete. Tommy's working security downtown now, sees everything, knows everyone. He says Eli's been making the rounds at all the upscale places, Meridian, the Glass House, that new wine bar on 5th Street. So he's not just dating Cleo, he's working the whole scene. Older women, successful women. Always the same pattern. Meets them at bars, charms them with talk about his big tech dreams, then starts borrowing money. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. You're saying he's a con artist. I'm saying he's got a type, and Cleo fits it perfectly. I thought about Eli's expensive clothes, his confident manner, the way he'd talked about loving Cleo after 3 months. It all made sense now. There's more, Mick said. Tommy saw him last week at the casino with some blonde woman who definitely wasn't Cleo. They were at the high-limit tables, throwing around serious money. Cleo's money. That'd be my guess. I felt something shift inside me, like tumblers falling into place in a lock. For weeks, I'd been thinking of myself as the victim in this situation. The betrayed husband, the fool who'd been replaced by a younger model. But maybe I wasn't the only one being played. I need to see those camera recordings again, I said. We went downstairs to Mick's office, a cluttered room behind the auto shop that served as headquarters for both businesses. I connected my encrypted drive to his computer and pulled up the footage from that Monday night. This time, I watched with different eyes. Instead of focusing on the betrayal, I studied Eli's behavior. The way he examined our bedroom like he was cataloging assets. The casual way he'd picked up my watch from the nightstand and checked the brand. The interest he'd shown in Cleo's jewelry box. He's not just touring the house, I said. He's appraising it. Mick leaned over my shoulder. What do you mean? Look at this. I rewound to the part where Eli examined the framed photo from our honeymoon. He's not looking at the picture. He's checking to see if the frame is real silver. Son of a... And here, I fast-forwarded to a section where Eli opened Cleo's jewelry box. He's not admiring her earrings. He's estimating their value. We watched the rest of the footage in silence. By the time it ended, I had a clear picture of what was happening. Eli wasn't just seducing my wife, he was planning to rob her blind. "What are you going to do?" Mick asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to let him destroy her, even after what she did to me. Mason, I get that you still care about Cleo, but she made her choice. Maybe she deserves whatever happens. Maybe. But I'm not going to be the guy who stands by and watches someone get scammed, even if that someone is my cheating wife." That afternoon, I drove past our old house for the first time since I'd left. Eli's car, a leased BMW, I now realized, was parked in my spot in the driveway. The sight of it made my hands clench on the steering wheel. I parked across the street and called Cleo's number. She answered on the first ring. "Mason." "Oh, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know. I got your messages." "Where are you? Can we meet somewhere and talk?" "I'm outside the house." Silence. Then, "You're here? Now?" "I can see Eli's car in the driveway. Nice wheels. Must be doing well in the tech business." "Mason, please don't do anything crazy." "Crazy like what? Like installing cameras in my own house to catch my wife cheating? Or crazy like disappearing when I found out she was giving tours to her boyfriend? That's not... It wasn't like that." "What was it like, Cleo?" Another pause. "Can you come inside? We should have this conversation face to face." "Is he in there?" "Yes, but then no. I'm not interested in another civilized discussion about how we can all move forward together." "What do you want, Mason?" "Good question. What did I want? Revenge? Reconciliation? An apology that would never come?" "I want you to be careful," I said finally. "What do you mean?" "I mean your boyfriend isn't who he says he is. And if you're not careful, you're going to lose a lot more than just your marriage." I hung up before she could respond and drove away, leaving her to figure out what that meant. That evening, I sat in Mick's apartment and made a list of everything I knew about Eli Pruitt. Unemployed but living an expensive lifestyle, dating multiple women simultaneously, showing unusual interest in valuable items during house tour, gambling with money that probably isn't his, presented himself as successful tech entrepreneur. It wasn't enough to prove anything, but it was a start. If I was going to expose him, I needed more evidence. I opened my laptop and started researching. Eli Pruitt was a common enough name, but when I added software developer and Ohio to the search, I found something interesting. 3 years ago, a man named Eli Pruitt had been arrested in Columbus for credit card fraud. The charges were dropped when he agreed to pay restitution, but the newspaper article included a photo that looked exactly like Cleo's new boyfriend. I dug deeper. 2 years before that, an Eli Pruitt had been sued by a former business partner for embezzling funds from their startup. The case was settled out of court, but the details were damning. By midnight, I had a file folder full of information about Eli's past. None of it painted him as the successful entrepreneur he claimed to be. Most of it suggested he was exactly what Mick's friend had implied, a con artist who targeted successful women. The question was what to do with this information. I could send it all to Cleo, but she probably wouldn't believe it. People in love, or what they think is love, have a remarkable ability to ignore evidence that contradicts their feelings. I could take it to the police, but Eli hadn't actually committed any crimes that I could prove. Lying about your job isn't illegal, and neither is being a lousy boyfriend, or I could handle this myself. The idea came to me slowly, like dawn breaking over the horizon. If Eli was running a con on Cleo, then maybe it was time someone ran a con on him. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Tara Hoffman answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. Mason, do you know what time it is? Tara was Cleo's best friend and the closest thing to a sister she'd ever had. They'd met in law school and stayed close even after Tara left the legal profession to open her own marketing firm. I need to talk to you, I said. About Cleo. Oh, Mason, I heard about the separation. I'm so sorry. Are you? Because from what I understand, you've been encouraging this whole thing. Silence. Then, I think you should talk to Cleo about this, not me. I tried that. She's too busy playing house with her new boyfriend to have an honest conversation. Look, I know you're hurt, but… Tara, how much do you know about Eli Pruitt? He's a nice guy. He makes Cleo happy. He's a con artist with a criminal record who's planning to rob her blind. Another pause. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. Meet me tomorrow for coffee. I'll show you what I found. I don't think that's a good idea. Tara, Cleo's about to make the biggest mistake of her life. You can either help me stop her, or you can explain to her parents why you didn't warn her when you had the chance. She agreed to meet me at noon. As I hung up the phone, I realized I'd crossed a line. I was no longer just the betrayed husband trying to salvage his dignity. I was actively working to sabotage Cleo's new relationship. The strange thing was, I felt better than I had in weeks. Tara looked older than I remembered. The stress of running her own business had added lines around her eyes and gray streaks to her honey blonde hair. She sat across from me at the coffee shop, clutching her mug like a lifeline. You look terrible, she said. So everyone keeps telling me. I'd chosen a place downtown, far enough from Cleo's office that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. The morning crowd had thinned out, leaving us mostly alone with the hiss of the espresso machine and the quiet conversations of a few other customers. Show me what you found, Tara said. I slid a manila folder across the table. She opened it and began reading, her expression growing more troubled with each page. This could be a different Eli Pruitt, she said finally. Look at the photo from the Columbus arrest. She studied it for a long moment. It looks like him, but… Tara, it's him. And if you know anything about Cleo's finances lately, you'll know I'm right. Her face went pale. What do you mean? Has she mentioned any unusual expenses? New clothes for him? Expensive dinners? Maybe helping him with rent or car payments? Tara's silence was answer enough. How much? I asked. I don't know exact amounts. Ballpark. Maybe 10,000 over the past 2 months. I whistled low. That's more than I thought. She said it was an investment in his company. What company? The one that exists only in his imagination? Tara closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. Even if you're right about all this, what do you expect me to do? Cleo's a grown woman. She can make her own mistakes. Can she? Because from where I sit, it looks like she's about to lose her house, her savings, and possibly her job when this all comes out. Her job? You think Henderson, Mills and Associates is going to keep a lawyer who got conned out of her life savings? Law firms care about judgment and reputation. This kind of scandal could destroy her career. Tara stared into her coffee cup. She really loves him, Mason. No, she doesn't. She loves the idea of him, the excitement, the feeling of being desired by someone new. But love doesn't make you liquidate your retirement account to fund someone else's gambling habit. How do you know about… Tara stopped herself. About the retirement account? Because I know Cleo. When she wants something, she finds a way to get it, even if it means making terrible financial decisions. I leaned forward. Tara, I'm not asking you to choose sides here. I'm asking you to help me save your best friend from making a mistake that will ruin her life. What did you have in mind? That was the question I'd been wrestling with all morning. How do you expose a con artist without becoming one yourself? I think we need to give Eli exactly what he wants, I said. Which is? Access to more money than he can resist. Tara frowned. I don't understand. Eli's been working Cleo slowly, building trust, taking small amounts. But guys like him always get greedy. If we dangle a big enough prize in front of him, he'll make a mistake. What kind of prize? Remember the Brennan inheritance case Cleo worked on last year? Tara nodded. It had been a high-profile probate case involving a wealthy family with more money than sense. Cleo had represented the estate and earned a substantial bonus when the case settled. What if Eli thought there was another inheritance coming? Something big enough to make him abandon his careful approach and go for the quick score? You want to run a con on the con artist? I want to give him enough rope to hang himself. Tara was quiet for a long time, thinking it through. Finally, she said, This could backfire spectacularly. It could. But doing nothing guarantees that Cleo gets destroyed. At least this way, she has a chance. What would you need from me? Information. Details about Eli that only someone close to Cleo would know. His habits, his weaknesses, his tells when he's lying. And if it works, if we expose him, then Cleo gets her life back and maybe learns something about trusting the wrong people. Tara agreed to help, though I could see the reluctance in her eyes. We spent the next hour planning our approach, working out the details of how to make Eli believe that Cleo was about to inherit a substantial sum of money. The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Tara would mention to Cleo that she'd heard rumors about another big inheritance case coming to the firm. Nothing specific, just enough to plant the seed. If Eli was the kind of man I thought he was, he'd start asking questions. Meanwhile, I would work on creating evidence to support the story. Fake documents, manufactured correspondence, anything that would make the inheritance seem real. There's one more thing, Tara said as we prepared to leave. Something you should know about Eli. What? He's not just dating Cleo. He's been asking her to marry him. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm. What did she say? She's thinking about it. Says she's never felt this way before. I thought about Cleo wearing someone else's ring, taking someone else's name, promising to love and honor a man who was systematically destroying her life. How long do we have? I asked. I don't know. Maybe a few weeks. A few weeks to expose Eli and save Cleo from the biggest mistake of her life. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. That afternoon, I drove to the public library and spent 3 hours researching inheritance law and estate procedures. I needed to understand the process well enough to create convincing fake documents. The librarian, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, who'd helped me with research projects back in high school, showed me how to access legal databases and court records. Working on a new case? She asked. Something like that. By closing time, I had enough information to create a believable inheritance scenario. The fictional deceased would be a distant relative of Cleo's, someone wealthy but reclusive who'd died without immediate family. The estate would be substantial but tied up in probate, requiring legal expertise to navigate the complex requirements. It was exactly the kind of case that would appeal to both Cleo's professional skills and Eli's greed. That evening, I met Mick at his gym to work off some of the nervous energy that had been building all day. The place was empty except for us, the overhead lights casting harsh shadows on the worn canvas of the boxing ring. "You're really going through with this," Mick said, wrapping my hands with practiced efficiency. "Unless you've got a better idea." "I've got lots of better ideas. Most of them involve you walking away and letting Cleo deal with her own problems." "I can't do that." "Why not? She didn't have any trouble walking away from you." I tested the wraps, flexing my fingers. Because someone has to be the adult here, and because despite everything, I still care about her. Mick shook his head but didn't argue. He'd been married once himself, briefly, and understood the complicated emotions that come with loving someone who doesn't love you back. We spent an hour working the heavy bag, my fists finding a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. With each punch, I felt some of the anger and frustration of the past weeks flow out of my system. "Feel better?" Mick asked when we finished. "A little. Good. Because tomorrow you're going to need all the clarity you can get." He was right. Tomorrow I would start the most important con of my life, one designed not to steal money, but to save the woman who'd broken my heart. As I walked back to the apartment above the gym, my phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "Talked to Cleo, mentioned the inheritance rumors. She seemed very interested." The game was in motion. Creating fake legal documents turned out to be easier than I'd expected. Years of working with contractors, architects, and city planning offices had taught me how official paperwork should look. The key was in the details, the right fonts, proper formatting, convincing letterheads. I spent 2 days assembling a fictional probate story centered on a Margaret Whitmore, described as Cleo's great-aunt, who had passed away in Florida and left behind an estate worth $2.3 million. The materials included a will naming Cleo as the main beneficiary, letters from a fictitious Miami law firm, and even a realistic-looking but entirely imaginary official record. The beauty of the con was its believability. Cleo had distant relatives she rarely spoke to, and it wasn't uncommon for wealthy people to die leaving unexpected inheritances to family members they'd never met. Tara called Wednesday evening with an update. "It's working," she said. "Cleo mentioned the inheritance to Eli, and he's been asking questions ever since. Wants to know about the timeline, the amount, whether there are any legal complications." What did she tell him? That she's meeting with the Miami lawyers next week to discuss the details. Perfect. That gave me time to prepare the next phase of the plan. Thursday morning, I drove to a copy shop in the next town over and had the documents printed on high-quality paper with embossed letterheads. The total cost was less than $50, a bargain for what I hoped would be Eli's undoing. That afternoon, I called Cleo's office from a burner phone, disguising my voice with a slight southern accent. "Henderson, Mills and Associates, this is Rebecca." "Yes, I'm calling for Ms. Cleo Reddan. This is James Morrison from Morrison, Keller and Associates in Miami. We're handling the Whitmore estate matter." "One moment, please." Cleo came on the line 30 seconds later. "This is Cleo Reddan." "Ms. Reddan, thank you for taking my call. I'm James Morrison representing the estate of Margaret Whitmore. I believe you've been expecting to hear from us." "Yes, I have. Though I have to admit I'm still surprised by all this. I barely knew my great-aunt." That's not uncommon in these situations. Mrs. Whitmore was quite specific in her instructions, however. She wanted the bulk of her estate to go to family members who'd made something of themselves professionally. I could hear the excitement in Cleo's voice. What exactly does that involve? Well, the estate is valued at approximately $2.3 million. However, there are some complex tax implications that need to be addressed before we can begin distribution. What kind of implications? Nothing insurmountable, but it will require some upfront costs to expedite the probate process. Roughly $50,000 to cover estate taxes and legal fees. Silence. Then, $50,000? I understand it's a substantial amount, but it's necessary to avoid having the estate tied up in probate for years. And of course, it's a small percentage of your total inheritance. I'll need to think about this. Of course, I'll be in Ohio next week on other business. Perhaps we could meet in person to discuss the details? That would be helpful. We arranged to meet the following Tuesday at a downtown hotel. After I hung up, I sat in my truck and wondered if I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The plan was working perfectly. Too perfectly, maybe. Friday evening, Tara called with news that confirmed my suspicions about Eli. "He's pushing hard for Cleo to move forward with the inheritance," she said. "Keeps talking about how they could use the money to start their life together." Their life together? "He proposed last night. Cleo said yes." The words hit me like a physical blow. 17 years of marriage, and Cleo was ready to marry someone she'd known for 3 months. When's the wedding? They're talking about something small, maybe next month. Eli says he doesn't want to wait. Of course he didn't. He wanted to lock down his claim to Cleo's assets before anyone could expose him. Tara, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to suggest that Cleo should have Eli sign a prenuptial agreement. She'll never go for that. She's convinced this is true love. Then convince her it's about protecting the inheritance. Tell her the lawyers in Miami recommended it as a way to shield the money from any potential legal complications. That's actually not a bad idea, legally speaking. Will you do it? I'll try. Saturday morning, I met with an old friend from high school who'd become a private investigator. Danny Kowalski owed me a favor from when I'd renovated his office at cost, and I was ready to collect. I need surveillance on someone, I told him over coffee at a truck stop outside town. What kind of surveillance? The kind that proves he's not who he says he is. I gave Danny everything I had on Eli. His address, his car, his habits, his hangouts. Within 2 hours, Danny had confirmed what I'd suspected. Eli was still seeing other women. Got photos of him with at least 3 different ladies this week, Danny said, showing me pictures on his phone. Brunette on Tuesday, redhead on Wednesday, blonde on Friday. None of them looked like your wife. Can you get me copies of those photos? Already printed them. But Mason, what are you planning to do with this? Whatever it takes to stop him. Sunday night, I sat in the apartment above Mick's gym and reviewed my plan one final time. Tuesday, I would meet with Cleo as the fictional lawyer from Miami. I would present her with documents requesting the $50,000 payment, knowing that Eli would pressure her to find the money quickly. If everything went according to plan, Eli would reveal his true nature by pushing Cleo to liquidate assets, take out loans, or otherwise put herself at financial risk for the sake of the inheritance. And when he did, I would be ready with evidence of his other relationships and his criminal past. It was a good plan. It might even work. But as I stared out the window at the empty street below, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to destroy more than just Eli's con game. I was about to destroy whatever was left of my marriage to Cleo and any chance we might have had at reconciliation. The question was whether saving her from Eli was worth losing her forever. By Tuesday morning, I had my answer. The Marriott downtown was the kind of place where business deals were made and secrets were traded over expensive coffee. I arrived early and chose a table in the lobby bar with a clear view of the elevators, dressed in a borrowed suit that made me look like the successful Miami lawyer I was pretending to be. Cleo appeared at exactly 2 o'clock, looking every inch the corporate attorney in a charcoal gray suit and heels that clicked authoritatively on the marble floor. She'd always been beautiful, but success had given her a confidence that made her radiant. It almost made me forget why I was there. Mr. Morrison? She approached my table with her hand extended. Ms. Reddan, thank you for coming. I shook her hand, noting that she still wore her wedding ring. Please, sit down. She settled into the chair across from me, and for a moment I was terrified she would recognize my voice. But the southern accent I'd been practicing seemed to work. She showed no sign of suspicion. I have to admit, she said, this whole situation still feels surreal. I had no idea my great-aunt even knew I existed. Mrs. Whitmore kept track of her family, even if she didn't maintain close relationships. She was particularly impressed by your legal career. I opened the briefcase I'd borrowed from Mick and removed the fake documents. As I mentioned on the phone, there are some procedural requirements we need to address before we can begin distribution of the estate. Cleo reviewed the papers with the careful attention of someone who'd spent years reading contracts. I held my breath, waiting for her to spot some detail that would expose the fraud. These tax requirements seem unusually high, she said finally. Unfortunately, Mrs. Whitmore's assets were structured in a way that creates significant tax liability. The $50,000 payment will expedite the process and ultimately save you money in the long run. And if I don't pay it? The estate could be tied up in probate for years. You might eventually receive the full inheritance, but it could take a decade or more. Cleo set down the documents. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be honest with you. $50,000 is a substantial sum. I'll need some time to arrange the financing. I understand completely. These situations often require creative financial solutions. How much time do I have? Ideally, we'd like to have everything resolved within the next 2 weeks. The longer we wait, the more complicated the tax situation becomes. She nodded, already calculating how to raise the money. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Retirement accounts, home equity loans, credit lines. There is one other matter we should discuss, I said. I understand you're recently engaged. Congratulations. Thank you. You'll want to make sure the inheritance is properly protected. In situations like this, we often recommend prenuptial agreements to shield inherited assets from any potential future complications. Her expression cooled slightly. I don't think that will be necessary. Of course, it's entirely your decision, but inherited wealth can create unexpected pressures on relationships. A prenuptial agreement protects both parties. I'll consider it. We shook hands, and I watched her walk away, her heels clicking determinedly across the lobby floor. Phase 1 was complete. Now I had to wait and see if Eli would take the bait. I didn't have to wait long. Tara called that evening with an update. You were right about Eli. As soon as Cleo told him about the $50,000 requirement, he started pushing her to find the money immediately. What did he suggest? Everything you predicted. Retirement account withdrawal, home equity loan, even borrowing against her life insurance policy. And the prenuptial agreement? He went ballistic. Started talking about trust and commitment, said she was insulting him by even bringing it up. Perfect. Eli was reacting exactly like a con artist who'd been backed into a corner. There's something else, Tara said. Cleo's been asking me about quick ways to raise cash. She's really considering liquidating everything for this inheritance. How much time do we have? She's meeting with her financial advisor tomorrow. If she moves forward, she could have the money by the end of the week. I had 3 days to expose Eli before Cleo destroyed her financial future chasing a fictional inheritance. Wednesday morning, I called Danny Kowalski. I need those surveillance photos today, I told him. Already on it, but I've got something better. Video footage of your boy Eli at the casino Monday night with his blonde girlfriend. They were throwing around serious money at the blackjack tables. How serious? Thousands. And here's the kicker. I recognize the blonde. She's married to a dentist from Westerville. Word is, she's been funding Eli's gambling for the past month. Can you get me copies of everything? Meet me at noon. The evidence was even better than I'd hoped. Danny had photos of Eli with 3 different women, plus video footage of him gambling away money that clearly wasn't his. It was enough to destroy his credibility with anyone who saw it. The question was how to get it to Cleo in a way that would make her listen. That afternoon, I drove past our old house and saw Eli's BMW in the driveway again. On impulse, I parked down the street and called Cleo's cell phone. Mason, where are you calling from? I'm in the neighborhood. We need to talk. About what? About the mistake you're about to make. Silence. Then, if this is about Eli, it's about $50,000 you're planning to give to a con artist. What are you talking about? The inheritance, Cleo. There is no inheritance. There's no Margaret Whitmore, no law firm in Miami, no $2.3 million waiting for you. Another pause. How do you know about the inheritance? Because I created it. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. You what? I created the fake documents, made the phone calls, even met with you at the hotel. It was all me, trying to prove that your boyfriend is a fraud. That's impossible. I met with the lawyer. You met with me, Cleo, in a borrowed suit, using a fake accent, trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. You're lying. Check the business card he gave you, call the phone number. Better yet, ask Eli why he's so eager for you to liquidate your assets for an inheritance you've never heard of. I hung up and drove away, leaving her to process what I'd told her. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "You son of a—" Cleo's voice was shaking with rage. "How dare you manipulate me like that? How dare I? Cleo, your boyfriend is a con artist with a criminal record who's been dating other women while planning to marry you for your money. I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By creating an elaborate fraud? By giving Eli enough rope to hang himself, and it worked, didn't it? He showed his true colors the moment money was involved. Get away from my house, Mason, and stay away from me. Cleo, listen to me." But she'd already hung up. I sat in my truck, staring at the house I'd spent 5 years renovating, and wondered if I'd just made everything worse. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "What did you do?" Cleo just called me crying, saying you've been stalking her and creating fake legal documents. I typed back, "I told her the truth about the inheritance. Did you tell her about Eli's other women?" "She won't listen. She thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Show her the photos Danny took. Show her the evidence of Eli's criminal record. She won't look at anything that comes from you." I realized then that I'd miscalculated badly. In trying to expose Eli's con, I'd made myself look like the unstable ex-husband who couldn't accept that his marriage was over. Cleo would never believe anything I told her now, no matter how much evidence I had. But maybe she'd believe it if it came from someone else. That evening, I met Tara at the same coffee shop where we'd planned the fake inheritance scheme. "This has gone too far," she said as soon as I sat down. "Cleo's talking about getting a restraining order. She needs to see the evidence about Eli. She won't look at anything connected to you. She thinks you're obsessed. Then we need to find another way." Tara shook her head. "There is no other way, Mason. You've burned every bridge. The best thing you can do now is walk away and let her make her own mistakes." "I can't do that." "Why not? You tried to help her, and she rejected the help. At some point, you have to accept that people are responsible for their own choices." "Because I love her." The words came out before I could stop them, hanging in the air between us like an accusation. "I know you do," Tara said gently. "But love doesn't give you the right to control someone else's life, even when you think you're protecting them." She was right, and I knew it. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two different things. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you go back to your life, and Cleo goes back to hers. Maybe Eli will show his true colors eventually, and maybe he won't. But that's not your problem anymore. And if he destroys her, then she'll pick up the pieces and move on. People are stronger than you think, Mason, even Cleo." I walked out of the coffee shop knowing that my marriage was truly over. Not just legally, but emotionally. I'd spent weeks trying to save a woman who didn't want to be saved, from a man who might not even be the monster I'd convinced myself he was. Maybe Eli really did love Cleo. Maybe I was the villain in this story, the bitter ex-husband who couldn't accept that his wife had found happiness with someone else. Or maybe I was right about everything, and Cleo would learn the truth the hard way. Either way, I was done fighting a war I couldn't win. It was time to surrender. 3 weeks passed in a blur of routine and regret. I threw myself into work, taking on every renovation project Mick could find. Physical labor had always been my therapy, and I needed all the therapy I could get. The Morrison kitchen renovation was finished. The Hendersons wanted their bathroom updated. Mrs. Chen needed her front porch rebuilt. I attacked each job with methodical precision, losing myself in measurements and materials, in problems that could be solved with the right tools and enough effort. My phone stayed silent. No calls from Cleo, no updates from Tara, no news about wedding plans or inheritance schemes. I'd asked Tara to stop giving me information about Cleo's life, and she'd agreed. "Clean breaks heal faster," she said, "but clean breaks are harder than they sound." I was installing crown molding in the Henderson dining room when Mick appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he said. I set down my nail gun. "About what?" "About the fact that your wife's boyfriend just got arrested for fraud." The molding suddenly seemed less important. "When?" "This morning. Danny Kowalski called me 20 minutes ago. Apparently Eli's been running cons all over the state. The police finally caught up with him." "What kind of cons?" "The usual: romance scams, investment fraud, identity theft. Turns out he's got warrants in 3 different counties." I felt a mixture of vindication and dread. I'd been right about Eli, but being right didn't feel as satisfying as I'd expected. "What about Cleo?" "That's the complicated part. She's not being charged with anything, but the police want to talk to her about money she gave him." "How much money?" Danny didn't have specifics, but it sounds substantial. I finished the molding installation in silence, my mind racing. If Eli had been arrested, then Cleo would finally see the truth about him. But it also meant she'd lost whatever money she'd given him, and possibly more. That afternoon, I drove to the police station downtown. Detective Rodriguez was handling the case, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who'd probably seen every kind of human stupidity imaginable. "I'm here about the Eli Pruitt arrest," I told her. "Are you a victim?" "I'm Mason Reddan. Eli was involved with my wife." She looked up from her paperwork with new interest. "The wife who gave him $60,000? $60,000. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. "Is she here?" "She left about an hour ago. Gave her statement, provided financial records. She's cooperating fully." "Is she in legal trouble?" "Not unless she knew about his other activities, which doesn't seem to be the case. She appears to be another victim." Another victim. That's what Cleo had become while I was playing games with fake inheritances and surveillance photos. "Detective, I have some information that might be helpful to your case." I spent the next hour telling her everything I knew about Eli's activities, including the surveillance photos Danny had taken and the research I'd done into his criminal background. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Why didn't you bring this to us sooner?" she asked when I finished. "I thought I could handle it myself." "By creating fake legal documents?" "That was a mistake. A mistake that could have been charged as fraud if your wife had decided to press charges. But she didn't." "No, she didn't. Lucky for you." I left the police station feeling like I'd been turned inside out. Everything I'd done to protect Cleo had been unnecessary. The police would have caught Eli eventually, probably with less collateral damage. But $60,000. How had she managed to raise that much money so quickly? I got my answer that evening when Tara called. "I thought you should know," she said without preamble. "Cleo had to take out a second mortgage on the house to cover what she gave Eli. The house we bought together. The house that's in her name, remember? You signed it over to her when you refinanced 3 years ago." I'd forgotten about that. Cleo's credit had been better, and the interest rate savings had seemed worth the paperwork hassle. "How much equity did she pull out?" "All of it. The house was worth about $180,000, and she owed maybe $120,000 on the original mortgage. She borrowed against the difference. So she's underwater now." "Completely. And with Eli's arrest, there's no chance of getting the money back." I thought about the 5 years I'd spent renovating that house. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, refinished hardwood floors, a deck I'd built with my own hands. All of it leveraged to fund a con artist's lifestyle. "Where is she staying?" "With her parents for now. She can't afford the mortgage payments anymore." Cleo's parents lived in a McMansion in the suburbs, the kind of place where appearances mattered more than substance. They'd never liked me, viewing me as beneath their daughter's social status. Having her move back home at 38 would be seen as a personal failure. "Is she okay?" "Define okay. She's not in jail, if that's what you mean. But she's humiliated, broke, and facing the possibility of bankruptcy. And she blames me. She blames herself, mostly. But yes, she's angry about the fake inheritance scheme. She feels like you manipulated her when she was vulnerable. I was trying to help. I know that. You know that. But from her perspective, her husband disappeared without explanation, then reappeared to play mind games while her world was falling apart. Tara was right. I'd been so focused on exposing Eli that I'd lost sight of what Cleo was going through. She'd made terrible decisions, but she'd made them while dealing with the end of her marriage and the pressure of a manipulative boyfriend. Can I see her? I don't think that's a good idea. Tara, she's lost everything. Her house, her savings, her relationship. She shouldn't have to go through this alone. She's not alone. She has family, friends, colleagues who are supporting her. But not her husband. Mason, you're not her husband anymore. You walked away, remember? You can't just come back when it's convenient. It's not about convenience. It's about responsibility. Responsibility for what? For not being there when she needed me. She didn't want you there. She chose Eli over you. Because I gave up too easily. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the things neither of us wanted to say. What do you want from me? Tara asked finally. I want you to ask her if she'll see me, just once, so I can apologize for the way I handled things. And then what? I don't know, maybe nothing. But she deserves an apology, and I deserve a chance to give it. Tara agreed to ask, though she warned me not to expect anything. 2 days later, she called back with Cleo's answer. She'll meet you, but only in a public place, and only for 30 minutes. We arranged to meet at the park by the lake, the same place where Cleo and I had had our first date 17 years earlier. It seemed fitting, somehow, to end where we'd begun. I arrived early and sat on the same bench where I'd nervously asked her about her law school plans all those years ago. The lake was calm, reflecting the gray October sky like a mirror. A few joggers passed by, and an elderly man fed ducks at the water's edge. Cleo appeared at exactly 3 o'clock, walking across the grass with the measured pace of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the events of the past month. Hello, Mason. Cleo, thank you for coming. She sat on the far end of the bench, maintaining careful distance between us. Tara said you wanted to apologize. I do. For the fake inheritance, for the surveillance, for all of it. I was trying to protect you, but I went about it the wrong way. You lied to me, elaborately and convincingly. Yes, you made me feel like a fool. That wasn't my intention, but that was the result. She stared out at the lake. Do you know what the worst part is? You were right about Eli, about everything, and I was too proud to listen. You couldn't have known. I could have been more careful. I could have done background checks, asked more questions, listened to my friends when they expressed concerns. You were in love. I was in lust. There's a difference. She turned to look at me. I wanted excitement, Mason. I wanted to feel desired and important and special. Eli made me feel all those things, at least for a while. And I didn't. You made me feel safe, comfortable, but not special. The honesty was brutal, but I appreciated it. I'm sorry for that, too. Don't apologize for who you are. You're a good man, Mason. You're honest and reliable and kind, but I wanted something else. And now? Now I'm 38 years old, living with my parents, and facing bankruptcy because I fell for the oldest con in the book. She laughed bitterly. I guess I got the excitement I was looking for. We sat in silence, watching the ducks paddle across the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and orange. What happens now? I asked. Now I figure out how to rebuild my life, find a new place to live, deal with my debts, try to salvage what's left of my career. Do you need help? From you? From anyone. I'll manage. I always do. She stood up, signaling that our 30 minutes were over. Cleo? Yes? For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you. Even when I was angry, even when I was hurt, I never stopped. I know. That's what makes this so sad. She walked away across the grass, her figure growing smaller until she disappeared behind the trees. I sat on the bench until full darkness fell, thinking about love and loss, and the space between what we want and what we need. The next morning, I called a lawyer and started divorce proceedings. It was time to let go.